Have you ever wondered what would happen if a simple night outside a glitzy Vegas casino turned into a battle of life and death? In our thrilling story, a seemingly ordinary lawyer named Tessa Malone steps off the strip, only to be hounded by a notorious biker gang. What the gang doesn't realize is that Tessa used to be a Navy SEAL, armed with skills that can outmatch even the toughest thugs. Their confrontation grows more intense by the minute, culminating in an all-or-nothing showdown that nobody saw coming. If you're excited to find out how Tessa navigates ambushes, outmaneuvers the Reaper's sons, and enlists some unexpected help, then stay tuned for the full tale. Trust us, you won't want to miss a single twist. And while you're here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because your support ensures more gripping stories are just around the corner. The bright neon glow of the Las Vegas Strip illuminated the horizon like a magnificent electric sunrise. Tourists flocked in crowds to marvel at the glittering casinos, their eyes full of awe and their hearts brimming with anticipation. In that dazzling realm of bright lights and grand illusions, nobody would expect trouble to lurk just outside the glamour. Yet fate often hides in the unlikeliest corners. Tessa Malone stepped out of the lavish Aurora Mirage Casino, her polished black pumps tapping lightly on the marble floor. In the city of chance, Tessa was used to analyzing odds and playing her hand with meticulous care, though not at the poker table. She was a lawyer, well-versed in corporate law, and had come to Vegas on business. Her trim black suit was impeccable, her hair meticulously pinned back, and her demeanor one of calm sophistication. Anyone who glimpsed her would see a capable attorney with an air of controlled confidence. Beneath that poised exterior, however, was a former Navy SEAL with a past that few knew existed. Originally from a small town in Texas, Tessa spent her youth yearning for a challenge. She found exactly that in the Navy. Training to become a SEAL tested every fiber of her being, mentally, physically, and emotionally. She had excelled, but as fate would have it, she later shifted from active duty to a career in law. Rarely did she mention her former life to colleagues in the corporate sphere, but it was never far from her mind. Her reflexes remained razor sharp, and her awareness of her surroundings had not dulled. She was still the same operative inside, only wearing a different uniform now. This particular evening, Tessa had concluded a negotiation with a client who, ironically, was looking to invest in security services across Nevada. The meeting ended late, but they had parted on good terms, her client promising a follow-up at a later date. Feeling the need for a brief moment of fresh air, rather stale Vegas air, though it was, Tessa opted to stroll a bit before catching a ride. She was about to call for a car when a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Parked somewhat askew in a poorly lit section of the lot were four motorbikes, the thick silhouettes suggesting that they belonged to serious riders. The rumble of engines had ceased some moments ago, but the men who straddled the machines or leaned against them did not blend into the tourist crowd at all. Clad in leather vests, emblazoned with the name of a biker club Tessa didn't recognize, they eyed her with predatory interest. There was a certain tension in the air, one that most casual passers-by wouldn't detect. Tessa, however, felt it like static electricity before a storm. Normally, Tessa would have paid them no mind. She had seen all kinds of people in her life, some good, some bad, and some in between. Yet there was something in the gaze of the man standing at the front of the group, a big fellow with snake tattoos running down both arms, that triggered her instinct to be on guard. There was arrogance in his stance, the casual way he cracked his knuckles, and the faint sneer on his lips. Still, Tessa walked forward, chin high, posture unwavering. She had no intention of letting them sense any trepidation. For a moment she mused how this was supposed to be just another routine trip. Fly in, make a deal, fly out. Little did she know that these men were about to drag her back into a world of conflict where all her carefully buried skills would be forced to the surface once again. Tessa's walk across the dimly lit parking lot felt longer than it should have. The dryness of the desert air brushed against her skin, reminding her how different this environment was from the sprawling, oceanic training grounds she had once known. Memories of her SEAL days flickered in her mind. The brutal PT sessions at dawn, the relentless drills in the water, the nighttime exercises in small teams. She pushed those recollections aside, steeling herself for the present moment, as she sensed the biker crew's gazes intensifying. One of them stepped forward, blocking her path. He was tall and wiry, with a face that showed a lifetime of late nights and questionable decisions. His leather vest bore a patch proclaiming him a member of the Reaper's Sons, accompanied by a grim skull insignia. "Hey there, sweetheart," he drawled in a voice that was meant to be both intimidating and mocking. "Fancy seeing a classy lady like you wandering around all by yourself?" Tessa locked eyes with him, neither shrinking back nor appearing overly aggressive. In her mind, she weighed her options. She was outnumbered, and though part of her welcomed any challenge, she knew better than to provoke them unnecessarily. The best approach was to de-escalate, at least until she couldn't. "I'm just passing through," she replied calmly, with a voice devoid of fear. "I suggest you let me continue on my way." Her composed response clearly amused the other bikers, who let out low chuckles. One of them, a stocky guy with a beard that reached his chest, flicked a cigarette butt onto the pavement. "Oh, she's got some nerve," he muttered. "No, please," or "Excuse me? Where are your manners?" Tessa felt her heart rate even out, her breathing calm. All those mindfulness exercises from her SEAL training came back as muscle memory. She knew that in confrontations like this, panic was the enemy. She also recognized that they were testing her, trying to gauge her reaction. For a moment, she toyed with revealing her identity, perhaps even pulling rank in a sense. But then she reconsidered. Her old commanding officer had always told her, "Information is power. Don't give it away if you don't need to." Instead, she chose a simple approach. "I don't want trouble," she stated evenly. "I've had a long day and I'm leaving town soon." "Now's that so?" asked the tall biker, feigning disappointment. He moved closer, the smell of liquor and stale sweat radiating off him. "Well, maybe you can spare a few minutes for us." Now Tessa saw the big guy with the snake tattoos making his way behind her, essentially cutting off any quick retreat. Two others fanned out, making a loose semicircle. Their eyes glinted with that particular type of malice that comes from men who thrive on intimidation. Despite the odds, Tessa felt no urge to flee. Her only concern was the risk of a public scene turning into a full-blown fiasco. However, if they left her, no choice. "Gentlemen," she said, noticing how the single word dripped with irony, "step aside. I really don't want you to regret this." For a fleeting moment, a hush fell over the parking lot. A siren wailed off in the distance, a reminder that Vegas never truly slept. The wind kicked up a few scraps of paper, swirling them between Tessa and the bikers. Then the man with the snake tattoos broke the silence with a harsh laugh. "Look at that, boys. The lady's got claws." Little did they realize those claws were far sharper than they could ever imagine. And though Tessa tried to keep her past in the shadows, it began to stir within her like a dormant beast roused from a long slumber. The aura of calm confidence that she exuded was not a bluff. It was a skill born of surviving the toughest training in the world. If push came to shove, these bikers were in for a rude awakening. While Tessa was no stranger to negotiations and legal battles, this was a different battlefield altogether, one she had once known intimately. The low rumble of nearby traffic mingled with the persistent neon buzz from the casino signage, creating an odd symphony in the background. She weighed her next words carefully. If there was a chance to avoid a fight, she would take it, though she doubted these men would allow a peaceful resolution. Her stance shifted ever so slightly, her left foot angled behind her, distributing her weight in a way that would enable quick movement. She remained outwardly calm, the epitome of composure in a pressed black suit and crisp white blouse. But inside, her instincts were firing up. She was running countless scenarios in her mind, analyzing their positions, their probable reactions. Classic situational awareness, a skill hammered into every SEAL. "You heard the lady," came a new voice from behind the group. It was an older man in a casino security uniform, flashlight in hand. He looked to be in his 50s, with a slight paunch and tired eyes but a determined set to his jaw. "If she's leaving, let her be." For a moment, Tessa felt relief. The presence of another person, ostensibly an authority figure, even a lightly armed one, might diffuse the tension. But the group's leader, Snake Tats, as Tessa labeled him, wore a scornful grin. "And who are you supposed to be? The parking lot police?" he scoffed. "Get out of here before you regret stepping in." The security guard swallowed, clearly second-guessing his decision to interfere. Yet he stood his ground, shining the flashlight at the group in a not-so-subtle warning. Tessa recognized the shift in atmosphere. A single distraction could either give her the opening she needed or spiral the confrontation into violence. One of the bikers, the tall, wiry one, lunged toward the guard, attempting to knock the flashlight aside. But Tessa reacted quicker, her body almost moving of its own accord. In a single fluid motion, she stepped forward, intercepted the biker's outstretched arm, and twisted. The wiry man let out a yelp as she locked his wrist, forcing him to pivot and stumble. It happened in less than 2 seconds, and for a split second, the entire group froze. The security guard gaped, astonished. He had not expected this corporate-looking woman to move like a trained fighter. The other bikers, however, quickly shook off their surprise. One charged at Tessa, fists clenched. She ducked under a wide swing, then delivered a sharp blow to the man's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. He staggered back, coughing violently. Snake Tats snarled, pointing a thick finger at Tessa. "You're gonna pay for that, lady," he snapped, the veins on his neck bulging. "No one embarrasses the Reaper's sons like this." Tessa returned his glare, her voice unwavering. "It's not too late to walk away. I've got nothing to prove, and neither do you." Snake Tats bared his teeth, appearing more infuriated than ever. His eyes flickered to the security guard, who looked torn between radioing for backup and trying to help Tessa. Sensing the shift in momentum, the older guard reached for his walkie-talkie, only for a third biker to lurch forward, yanking it from his grasp and hurling it across the parking lot. Tessa realized the confrontation had just escalated beyond a minor altercation. She tensed, her body ready for combat. She might be a lawyer now, but she was still Tessa Malone, former Navy SEAL, and she knew exactly how to protect herself. Inside, she felt a pang of regret that this had to happen here, in the glare of neon lights overshadowing the city's nightly revelry. But sometimes trouble found you, no matter how diligently you tried to leave the past behind. As the tension soared, Tessa noticed a small crowd forming at the casino's entrance, drawn by the commotion. Some onlookers held up their phones, ready to record. The hum of adrenaline coursed through Tessa's veins, and her mind cycled through possible outcomes. Engaging in a full-blown brawl in a public parking lot was the last thing she wanted, but the bikers weren't backing off. They had invested their pride in the confrontation. Worse, they likely believed they had her outnumbered and outmatched. She glanced briefly at the stunned security guard. He seemed rattled but still present, which might be an asset if he found the courage to rejoin her side. Yet Tessa did not count on that. She had learned long ago that when push came to shove, you had to rely on your own skill and wits. Snake Tats, standing a short distance away, held his position like a predator assessing an adversary. He was bigger, heavier, and presumably stronger than Tessa. "You're fast," he growled, "but you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Tessa almost smiled. If only he knew that she had faced far worse dangers on covert missions around the globe. But she refrained from quipping about her past. She preferred leaving him in the dark, letting his ignorance become his downfall. Instead, she spoke in a calm, controlled tone. "You can still walk away. No harm done, if you leave now." His reply came in the form of a feral grin. "We'll be leaving when we damn well please." He gestured to the two bikers still on their feet, instructing them with a silent nod. Tessa's muscles tensed as they began to circle around her. Though the crowd might partially deter an outright assault, Tessa knew that in certain circles, public humiliation only fueled aggression. Determined to prevent a free-for-all, Tessa calculated her moves. She pivoted on her heel to keep them in sight, stepping near a row of parked cars. The tall, wiry biker she had momentarily subdued was recovering, rubbing his wrist with a scowl. The other, who had taken a punch to the ribs, was breathing heavily but still functional. Snake Tats watched with a sort of predatory glee, letting his men do the dirty work while he observed how Tessa fought. At that moment, a memory rushed through her mind. Her old commander teaching her about controlling the battlefield, using anything and everything to her advantage. A recollection of sparring sessions flashed before her eyes. The barked commands, the sweaty exhaustion, the sense of camaraderie. She eyed the cars, the environment, the positions of the men. If it came to an all-out brawl, she would guide the fight to her terms. One biker lunged, throwing a sloppy punch that Tessa sidestepped. She countered with a quick strike to the side of his neck, momentarily stunning him. The second advanced from her other flank, swinging a chain he'd pulled from his vest. Tessa ducked low, the chain whistling above her head. She thrust her palm upward, catching the man under the chin. He stumbled back, cursing. Anger twisted Snake Tat's features as he saw his buddies getting outmaneuvered by a woman who didn't look like she belonged anywhere near a street fight. Meanwhile, the murmurs from the watching crowd grew louder, some people shouting words of encouragement or shock. A lone voice called out, "Somebody call the cops!" But Tessa doubted if the police would arrive quickly enough to de-escalate matters. She sensed Snake Tats was about to join in directly, drawn by the mounting frustration of his crew. Her heart pounded, but she remained focused, her body coiled for rapid movement. Tessa had spent years training for high-stakes scenarios, though typically with well-equipped and disciplined squads. Now she was on her own. But ironically, that made her rely more on the skill set that once defined her life. Though the legal realm had become her new battlefield, Tessa now stood on the threshold between her corporate identity and her hidden warrior core. The next few moments would decide whether she could keep her secrets intact or whether the Reaper's sons would unwittingly expose what lurked beneath her tailored blazer. It was clear to Tessa that words had failed. The friction had ignited into open confrontation, and with that, the objective shifted from de-escalation to damage control. She mentally categorized the bikers. The wiry one with the wrist lock was agile but reckless, the bearded one was strong but slow, and Snake Tats himself loomed as the biggest threat, physically and in terms of leadership. The bearded biker was the first to charge again, brandishing a battered length of pipe. Tessa watched the arc of the swing, stepped just outside its path, and used the man's momentum against him. She seized his arm and forced him down, twisting until he howled in pain, dropping the pipe. Before she could deliver another blow, the wiry one attacked from behind. She spun, deflecting his punch, though he managed to graze her shoulder. It hurt, a reminder that she wasn't invincible, but her reflexes kicked in full force. She snapped a front kick into his abdomen, sending him backward into the side of a parked SUV. Caught up in the adrenaline rush, she barely registered the cacophony of gasps from the onlookers. One part of her mind registered that phone cameras were pointed in her direction, capturing every move. That was a problem for later. For now, she had to ensure her own safety, and that of anyone else who might end up in the crossfire. Snake Tats advanced, cracking his knuckles. "What the hell are you?" he spat, eyes glinting with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "No ordinary lawyer fights like that." Tessa didn't respond. She maintained her defensive stance, arms loose and ready, breathing steady. She had sparred with men bigger than him, but size always demanded caution. One solid blow from a man of Snake Tats's build could cause serious injury, no matter how skilled she was. The big man lunged without warning, throwing a powerful right hook. Tessa blocked it, but her forearm throbbed under the impact. He followed up with a knee aimed at her midsection. She pivoted out of the way, slamming her elbow into his side. Despite her strike, he barely flinched. He came at her again, driving her back near the row of cars. "You think you can embarrass us?" Snake Tats hissed, throwing a jab. Tessa ducked, feeling the rush of air as the punch whizzed past her ear. She retaliated with a swift uppercut that connected with his jaw, staggering him. Yet he stayed on his feet, adrenaline fueling his anger. Somewhere behind them, the security guard tried to intervene again, attempting to pull one of the fallen bikers away. The wiry man hissed at him, forcing him to retreat. Another cry from the small crowd rang out. "Help's on the way!" It wasn't clear who had made the call or how soon help would arrive, but Tessa was fairly certain the Reaper's sons might not wait around once they realized the police were imminent. Snake Tats swung again, and Tessa blocked once more, though the sheer force rattled her bones. She responded with 2 quick punches to his ribcage, but it was like striking a granite wall. He let out a roar and charged, tackling her against a sedan. For a split second, the breath whooshed out of her lungs. She felt metal digging into her back, and her mind screamed for her to regain control. Focusing on her training, Tessa managed to twist free enough to drive her knee into Snake Tats's thigh, forcing him to loosen his hold. She seized the opportunity to push off the car and create distance. This time, his face was contorted with pain. Yet the fury in his eyes remained unabated. He was determined, perhaps blinded by rage, to bring her down at any cost. Steeling herself, Tessa made a split-second decision. She would not hold back. These men had cornered her, outnumbered her, and threatened her safety. She needed to end the fight decisively before it escalated further, or before someone ended up severely hurt. Already she could sense this was only the beginning. If the Reaper's sons were bold enough to pick a fight with a stranger outside a casino, there was likely more trouble to come. Before Tessa could make the next move, the sound of sirens in the distance grew louder. Blue and red lights flickered against the buildings at the end of the street. The crowd outside the casino parted like a wave, anticipating an arrival of law enforcement. The tension in the air bristled with a new energy. Some looked relieved at the possibility of police intervention. Others worried that the sudden presence of flashing lights might turn everything more chaotic. Snarling in frustration, Snake Tats glanced over his shoulder. He apparently had no desire to remain at the scene once the cops arrived. He spat at the ground near Tessa's feet, leveling her with a glare that promised retaliation. "This ain't over," he growled. "Nobody shows up the Reaper's sons." On some silent cue, the other bikers, those still able to stand, scrambled to their bikes. The wiry one grabbed the bearded man by the arm and half-dragged him away. Tessa watched as they staggered to their motorcycles, engines roaring to life in a shattering cacophony. Snake Tats lingered a moment longer, locking eyes with Tessa, a malicious promise flickering across his expression. "We'll see you again, lawyer," he said, as if her profession was a joke. Then he hopped onto his own bike, revved it, and peeled out of the parking lot, his gang following close behind. The security guard stumbled forward, retrieving his discarded walkie-talkie. He looked at Tessa with wide eyes. "Ma'am, are you all right?" His voice trembled slightly, adrenaline and confusion muddying his composure. Tessa inhaled a shaky breath, straightening her suit jacket. "I'm fine," she replied, though her arm throbbed where she had blocked the hardest punches. A few minor bruises were a small price to pay for preserving her safety. "Thank you for trying to help." A couple of onlookers approached, offering to share phone footage of the incident. Tessa graciously declined for the moment, though she acknowledged that evidence could be valuable if the bikers pressed charges or if the police wanted more details. She spotted the approaching patrol cars, lights washing over the casino's facade. This was her cue to prepare for questions, a lot of them. As the first officer stepped out of the squad car, Tessa forced her breathing back to normal and carefully maintained her composure. She introduced herself, showing her ID and explaining that she had been attacked by a group of bikers. The security guard corroborated her story, still somewhat in shock. The officer looked from Tessa to the scuffed pavement and the scattered traces of the altercation. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need medical assistance?" the officer asked, concern evident in his tone. Tessa politely declined, indicating she had only minor bruises. Another officer took down her statement in meticulous detail, while Tessa provided as clear a description of the bikers as she could. She omitted her combat background, describing only what was necessary. As the police concluded their immediate inquiries, Tessa noticed the cluster of spectators dispersing. Nightlife in Vegas was never short on drama, and people had other spectacles to chase. The officers promised to file a report and be on the lookout for the Reaper's sons. Tessa was left standing in the swirl of neon lights and desert wind, her pulse still elevated, though her mind had already begun shifting to the next step. A part of her recognized the danger. The Reaper's sons were unlikely to let this go. She had humiliated them, and in their world, that might as well be a declaration of war. Another part of her felt resigned. This was exactly the kind of violent entanglement she had hoped to avoid when she left the military. Still, it appeared that old habits die hard. Conflict had a way of finding her, no matter how many suits she wore or how many legal papers she signed. She glanced at the now empty spot where the bikers had stood. The harsh words still echoed in her ears. "This ain't over." The question remained, how far would they go to settle the score? In the aftermath of the incident, Tessa spent a restless night. She returned to her hotel suite, perched on the edge of the bed, shoes cast aside. Her phone lying on the nightstand vibrated intermittently with messages, friends and colleagues checking in, or merely carrying on with normal conversation. But normality felt distant. She knew she needed to gather more information. Law school had taught her the value of knowledge in any conflict, a principle that dovetailed neatly with her SEAL training. You always reconnoiter. With that in mind, she tapped through a series of searches about the Reaper's sons. Sure enough, the biker gang had a rap sheet spanning multiple states: extortion, assault, drug distribution, and more. They didn't appear to be the largest syndicate around Las Vegas, but they were aggressive and territorial, a dangerous combination. Her chest tightened at the thought that they might be coming after her. She had no illusions. They were almost certainly planning some form of payback. She thought about contacting local authorities with more detailed warnings. But her experience had taught her that law enforcement, while well-intentioned, couldn't always provide the level of protection needed, especially if the Reaper's sons decided to operate in the shadows. Tessa decided it might be wise to rely on her old skill set, the one she kept locked away for when all else fails. By morning, she had formulated a plan: gather personal protection, set up a fallback spot, and, if necessary, contact a few trusted acquaintances from her military days. They were scattered across the country, some still on active duty, others like her, having transitioned into civilian life. She wasn't keen on dragging anyone else into her mess, but if the Reaper's sons escalated to lethal measures, she preferred not to stand alone. Before leaving her hotel room, Tessa inspected her bruises in the mirror. They weren't too bad: a few darkening welts on her forearms, a tender spot on her shoulder. Nothing that wouldn't heal, but each mark reminded her of the confrontation in the parking lot, the look in Snake Tat's eyes, and the vow that this ain't over. She slid on a lightweight blazer that concealed most of the discoloration and stepped out, determination fueling her every step. Her first stop was a reputable local security equipment store, one that catered discreetly to clients requiring advanced personal defense. She went through the standard procedure: presenting identification, answering the store clerk's carefully worded questions. She purchased non-lethal options first: pepper spray, a collapsible baton, a top-of-the-line stun gun. Tessa's training made her proficient in an array of weapons, but she wasn't eager to escalate to firearms in the middle of a crowded city. Still, she couldn't shake the possibility that the bikers might be armed. Without drawing unnecessary attention, she made a mental note of a nearby range that could supply more substantial armaments if it came down to that. Next, she discreetly reached out to an old friend, Daniel "Doc" Nash, once a combat medic in her SEAL team. They had remained in loose contact over the years. Doc had settled in Nevada after his service, working as a paramedic while occasionally dabbling in security consulting. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm but tinged with curiosity. "Tessa, it's been a while. Everything okay?" She hesitated, then decided to be upfront. "I might have stirred up a hornet's nest," she admitted. "Some local bikers, Reaper's sons, started something, and I don't think they're letting it go anytime soon." He exhaled softly, sensing the gravity. "Where are you now?" "I'm still in Vegas. Not sure how long I'll stay, but I need to make sure I'm prepared. They got a good look at me, and they've got numbers on their side." There was a pause before Doc answered. "You know I'll help any way I can. I can swing by. Maybe we can talk through options. The city's big, but they might try to corner you again." Relief washed over Tessa. She thanked him, and they arranged to meet later that day. As she ended the call, she felt a renewed sense of resolve. She had allies, and more importantly, she had a plan. Her old self, the part that had gone through Hell Week and come out stronger, stirred once again. Though she longed for a life where she never had to use those dormant skills, she recognized that survival sometimes demanded revealing who she really was: a fighter, a survivor, a protector. If the Reaper's sons were set on vengeance, they would soon discover that picking a fight with Tessa Malone, ex-Navy SEAL, was a gamble they should never have taken. Doc arrived at Tessa's hotel that afternoon, driving a nondescript sedan. He still had the same easy grin and thoughtful eyes that Tessa remembered from their deployments. Before, they'd often served together on missions that required surgical precision, with Doc patching them up when things got dicey. Seeing him now wearing civilian clothes, hair a little grayer, made Tessa acknowledge just how much time had passed. After greetings, they settled at a quiet table in the hotel's lounge, sipping coffee while speaking in low tones. Tessa recounted the parking lot incident in detail. Doc listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions about the bikers' numbers, their patches, and the approximate location of the altercation. Sounds like a standard intimidation gang, he finally said. Dangerous enough if they corner you again, though. Tessa nodded, crossing her arms. I've got no illusions about their capacity for violence. I was lucky I got out of there with just bruises. They might escalate next time. Guns, knives, who knows? Doc leaned forward, his voice dropping. You said you've done some equipment shopping. That's good. But we both know the best defense might be to disappear for a bit, especially if you don't need to be here. Any chance you can wrap up your business early and head back home? I've got pending negotiations, Tessa replied. And besides, if I run, they'll think they won. They'll keep searching for me or tracking me down eventually. It's better I handle this now, if it comes to that. Doc nodded, understanding her mindset. All right, then let's ensure you're not alone. You recall Jared? He's also in Nevada these days, working private security for some bigwig. He might know a few things about local biker gangs, maybe even have contacts in law enforcement or the FBI. We can give him a call. They discuss strategies from simply hiring bodyguards to proactively confronting the Reaper's sons in a more controlled environment. Tessa was wary of direct engagement. Initiating a confrontation might lead to unnecessary bloodshed. However, she wasn't naive about their potential return. Doc glanced around the lounge, making sure no one was eavesdropping. We could try to gather intel on their clubhouse, he suggested. If we know where they congregate, we might negotiate from a position of strength or at least keep tabs on them. Tessa exhaled slowly. Let's start with more info. I can't risk dancing blind in the dark. If we corner them, they might come back at us with even more numbers or call in allies from out of state. They set a plan in motion. Doc would make discreet inquiries through some of his paramedic contacts, who often saw the underbelly of the city, gang members wounded in fights or drug overdoses. Meanwhile, Tessa would maintain a lower profile, be extra cautious in her movements, and look into potential safe houses or short-term rentals away from the busy strip. If push came to shove, Tessa wanted a location where she could handle an attack without endangering innocent bystanders. Standing to leave, Doc placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I've got your back, he said simply, and Tessa believed him. They had been through too much together for her to doubt that. The spark of camaraderie reminded her of missions past, how they always had each other's six in dire situations. As Doc departed, Tessa walked him to the lobby. The sun was setting over Vegas, painting the skyscrapers and casinos in a golden glow. She watched him drive away, then turned her attention to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Snake Tats and his crew were nursing their bruised egos and plotting their next move. If they came for her, she needed to be ready. In the quiet hush of her mind, Tessa felt an odd mixture of anticipation and dread. This was what she had trained for, but it wasn't a life she particularly longed to revisit. Yet some part of her, buried deep, admitted the truth. She was more than just a lawyer. She was a warrior with a moral code, and if these bikers forced her hand, they would discover that underestimating Tessa Malone was the gravest error they could make. 2 nights later, just as the neon cityscape was rolling into its typical frenzy, Tessa received an unexpected phone call from Doc. His tone was terse. I've got a lead. Jared says the Reaper's sons frequent a dive bar on the outskirts. Rattlesnake's Den. He suggests we check it out. Discreetly. That might be our best chance to assess their numbers, Tessa responded. She paused, then added, but we have to be careful. It could be a setup. Are you okay to come along? I've been in stickier situations, Doc said with a wry chuckle. Meet me in the parking lot at Faraday's Diner an hour from now. We'll go together. Shaktaram. Tessa packed quickly, a slim bag with first aid essentials, the non-lethal weapons she had purchased, and a few extra items from her clandestine stash. The baton and stun gun, once foreign to her everyday life, felt strangely familiar now. She wore jeans and a lightweight jacket, practical clothing that allowed free movement. 45 minutes later, she pulled into the Faraday's Diner lot, a modest place with flickering fluorescent lights. Doc's sedan was already there. They greeted each other with a shared sense of caution. No words were wasted on small talk. They had a mission to accomplish. Tessa slipped into Doc's passenger seat, and they set off toward the bar's location in relative silence. The Rattlesnake's Den stood on a desolate stretch of road, surrounded by industrial buildings and a scattering of old trailers. Its dull neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly green hue. Outside, a row of motorcycles lined the curb, some bearing the distinctive skull patch that Tessa recognized. The bass of muffled rock music throbbed through the walls, vibrating the night air. Doc parked at a discreet distance, well outside the main illumination. They scanned the lot, noting a black van and two older trucks in addition to the bikes. "Looks like they've got quite a crowd tonight," Doc murmured. Tessa nodded, her pulse steady but heightened. "We go in. Keep a low profile, try to blend. We look for Snake Tats or his crew. We don't engage unless we have to." Doc exhaled slowly. "Copy that." They approached the bar's entrance, footsteps crunching on gravel. The bouncer eyed them warily but let them through after a brief once-over. Inside, smoke hung in the air, and the smell of stale beer mingled with sweat. Colored lights flashed across a dingy dance floor occupied by a few patrons, swaying listlessly to a classic rock track. The roar of conversation was punctuated by occasional bouts of raucous laughter. Amid the crowd, Tessa recognized two of the bikers from the parking lot, the tall, wiry one and the bearded one, shooting pool near the back. She couldn't see Snake Tats immediately, but she suspected he'd be here. She and Doc slipped into a corner booth, ordering non-alcoholic drinks to avoid dulling their senses. From their vantage, they could survey most of the bar. They waited. Minutes dragged by as they sipped their drinks and pretended to chat, though both kept eyes peeled for any sign of trouble. Finally, Tessa spotted Snake Tats entering from a side door, accompanied by a man wearing the Reaper's Son's insignia. The new man stood tall with a shaved head and a piercing gaze. They greeted the wiry biker with curt nods, then cast a look around the bar as if searching for something or someone. Tessa's gut twisted. She slid lower in her seat, hoping the dim lighting would keep them from recognizing her immediately. Doc gently placed a hand on her arm, indicating they should remain calm. The bikers congregated at a table, deep in discussion. Occasional bursts of laughter or angry gesturing suggested they were either celebrating a recent success or planning a new endeavor. Tessa tried to glean snippets of their conversation over the buzz of the music. She caught mention of Vegas Strip, Teach a Lesson, and a few other fragments that sent a chill through her. She leaned closer to Doc. "They're definitely plotting something," she whispered. Doc's brow furrowed. "Question is, does it involve you, or is there more going on?" Before Tessa could respond, the wiry biker turned, scanning the bar. His gaze swept across their corner. She lowered her eyes, silently praying he wouldn't notice her. But fate had other plans. The wiry man stiffened. His eyes locked on Tessa's face and a slow grin formed, an expression of dark triumph. She could almost see the adrenaline flood his body. He elbowed Snake Tats, pointing in their direction. In an instant, the entire group's mood shifted from rowdy celebration to electric aggression. Snake Tats rose, his large frame dwarfing the table as he glared at Tessa and Doc. This was no longer recon. It was about to become a showdown. The moment hung, tense and charged, like the final calm before a desert thunderstorm. Tessa felt her heartbeat quicken, though her face remained composed. Doc's hand slipped beneath the table, likely reaching for whatever discreet protection he had brought. Snake Tats and his men began to move, forming an imposing line that approached with the inevitability of a freight train. Tessa slid out of the booth first, adopting a stance that would allow her to react swiftly. She heard Doc do the same behind her. The bar's other patrons, sensing impending chaos, scattered to the edges of the room or hurried out the door. In the strobing lights, Tessa locked eyes with the man who had vowed revenge. "Well, look who it is," Snake Tats growled, voice dripping with contempt. "Didn't think you'd have the nerve to come snooping around our territory. Or maybe you're just dumb enough to think we forgot what happened outside that casino." Tessa met his gaze unflinchingly, a storm of determination swirling in her chest. "I'm not looking for trouble. I just wanted to know what I'm dealing with." The Reaper's Son's leader threw his head back in a harsh laugh. "You're dealing with us, sweetheart, and we don't take kindly to strangers who make us look like fools." Doc moved to stand beside Tessa, his posture calm but ready. "Look," he said in an even tone, "there's no reason for more violence. She defended herself. We can settle this peacefully." "Peacefully?" hissed the wiry biker. "You broke my wrist." He flexed the bandaged joint with a wince. glaring at Tessa like she was the devil incarnate. "You shouldn't have attacked me," Tessa said quietly. "Enough talk," Snake Tats barked, gesturing for his men to spread out, encircling them. The music cut off as someone pulled the plug on the jukebox, leaving only the hum of overhead lights. Tessa's instincts flared. This was a powder keg, ready to explode. The shaved-head biker, likely a higher-ranked member, stepped forward. "Boss, let's handle this outside. We don't need the cops showing up again." Snake Tats nodded, a sinister smile twisting his lips. "Outside, then. We'll give you a fair shot at running if you want to try." Tessa exchanged a glance with Doc. They had no illusions about the odds. If they went outside, they'd likely face a swarm of bikers with no immediate help. Yet staying indoors could trap them. Tessa weighed the pros and cons swiftly. "All right," she said finally. "Outside." In a tense procession, they exited the bar, the bikers fanning out around them. The parking lot was dark, illuminated by a single flickering street lamp that cast elongated shadows. A desert wind kicked up dust, swirling it around everyone's feet, making the scene feel even more ominous. Snake Tats removed his vest, tossing it onto a nearby motorcycle. "No more cameras this time," he growled. "No security guards to bail you out." Tessa took a slow breath, her mind steadying with the clarity of imminent action. She sized up the group, 6 bikers in total, each bearing various forms of makeshift weaponry, chains, pipes, knives. Doc was at her side, tension radiating from his stance. She silently thanked her old training for teaching her to remain calm in life-threatening situations. "You can still walk away," Tessa offered one final time, hoping against hope. "None of you need to get hurt," Snake Tat snorted. "Lady, you made the wrong choice. You're about to find out what happens when you cross us." The moment snapped, like a twig under too much pressure. The bikers charged. Tessa and Doc moved in tandem, each focusing on one attacker at a time. Tessa sidestepped a chain swung at her head, knocking the wielder off balance with a precise kick to the knee. Doc deftly evaded a wild punch, slamming an elbow into the man's temple. But unlike the previous scuffle, the Reaper's sons were fully prepared this time. They came in force, attacking from multiple angles. Tessa ducked a blade aimed at her midsection, responding with a snap kick that connected solidly with the assailant's chest. Pain lanced up her leg. He was heavier than she expected. But she pressed the advantage, striking again before he could recover. Somewhere in the chaos, Doc let out a grunt. She risked a glance and saw him grappling with 2 bikers at once. He managed to block a strike but took a hit to the ribs. Anger flashed through Tessa as she lunged to help. But Snake Tats cut her off, slamming a beefy arm across her back. She stumbled, gasping at the sudden burst of pain. "There's no escape this time," Snake Tats snarled, swinging a fist that Tessa narrowly evaded. Summoning every ounce of her training, she retaliated with a well-aimed strike to his jaw. He staggered but refused to go down, glaring at her with murderous intent. Around them, the night echoed with grunts, curses, and the dull thud of the bodies colliding. The street lamp flickered, momentarily plunging the lot into near darkness. Tessa sensed the frenzy intensifying. She deftly pulled out her collapsible baton, snapping it open. With a swift motion, she parried an incoming pipe, the clang of metal on metal sending sparks into the air. Sweat trickled down her brow, her heart hammering like it had in some of the deadliest operations of her past. Yet even in this maelstrom of violence, Tessa held firm to her resolve. She was no monster. She simply refused to be a victim. Snake Tats roared again, raising a knife. Her eyes darted to the blade's glint, calculating her next move. Survival demanded speed, precision, and a dash of unpredictability, the hallmarks of her SEAL training. Whether the Reaper's sons knew it or not, they had triggered a side of Tessa that few had ever truly witnessed, and now they would reap the consequences of their choice. Red and blue lights flared again across the parking lot, sirens echoing through the deserted streets. This time, Tessa and Doc did not mind the interruption. Local law enforcement arrived in force, lights flooding the scene of the brawl. Outnumbered and injured, the Reaper's sons were forced to retreat or surrender. Some attempted to flee on their bikes, while others dropped to their knees under the unwavering aim of police weapons. Tessa leaned against a dented car, breathing heavily, bruised but unbroken. Doc stood beside her, wincing at a growing welt on his arm. Still, they exchanged a relieved look. They had held their ground, and more importantly, they had survived. As dawn broke over the horizon, Tessa gave her statement for the second time in a week, quietly downplaying her background. She could see the curiosity in the officers' eyes, but they asked no pressing questions. The defeated bikers glowered in handcuffs, muttering curses. Snake Tats, glaring with undisguised hatred, was marched away by two uniformed cops. Despite the carnage, Tessa felt an unexpected calm settle over her. She had done what she must, again, and though she did not relish violence, she understood it was sometimes necessary to stand against those who sought to harm others. For now, Las Vegas resumed its unyielding rhythm, the casinos blinking and buzzing as though nothing had happened. But Tessa Malone, ex-Navy SEAL turned lawyer, knew that beneath the city's glitz, she had reawakened a part of herself she could never fully leave behind. In the end, Tessa's unwavering courage and loyalty to those she cares about shine through as she triumphs over the Reaper's sons. Despite bearing the scars of past battles, both literal and emotional, she emerges stronger and more determined than ever. Her commitment to standing up for what's right, coupled with her willingness to adapt, reminds us that sometimes our greatest trials reveal the best in us. Even in a city of neon lights and countless distractions, true character is always on display. From my personal perspective, Tessa's story serves as a testament to the power of resilience, friendship, and moral conviction. It proves that no matter how daunting the challenges we face, we can always find a way to persevere. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts and interpretations of the story. Feel free to comment below and share your opinions. Let's keep the conversation going.